Welcome to everyone joining us this morning or afternoon, wherever you're zooming in from, for this webinar on lithium and environmental justice in Imperial Valley. And as folks are joining, I'm personally zooming in from San Jose, California, on the unceded ancestral lands of the Muwekma tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I thought as folks were joining, maybe they'd I would like to welcome people to enter where they're zooming in from into the chat. And if you don't know, I'll put the link to the native lands map system to check that out yourself. This gives us a sense for where people are and exposes some of the names that we should become familiar with on the lands whose ancestral lands we are zooming in from or sitting on or working at, living at. And what I'll do now is just start to introduce some of our speakers today. So as you know, lithium is a topic of big concern for those of us who are interested in climate change and decarbonization, for those of us who are interested in clean air, electrification of vehicles, bringing solar, wind, and geothermal electricity to our grid. Lithium battery storage will be critical to that as well. But we want to make sure that as we develop resources like this, that they don't reproduce the harms that we've seen from extractive industries in the past. And the Salton Sea is a particular interest because of the amount of lithium in the geothermal anomaly that's been discovered there, but also we know that there are pre-existing severe, in some cases, environmental problems there, including air quality and such. So today we have a group of folks who are going to tell us a bit more about the region, about the challenges, so we can have a better conversation and understanding of the environmental justice implications of the development of this resource. So with us today, we have, again, a group of folks who are very well versed in the region's challenges. First speaker today will be Preston Arrowweed, who is a Quetzon and Kamai elder and member of the Fort Yuma Quetzon tribe. Yeah, he's an educator, environmentalist, actor, playwright, and singer with a deep and comprehensive understanding of tribal songs, history, and ceremony. Preston is president of the Amut Pipa Foundation and works for the preservation of Quetzon language, culture, and art, and operates the KUAV radio station from the Quetzon Reservation. Preston has been involved in many struggles to protect sacred landscapes from desecration by extractive industries, including successful campaigns to stop the nuclear waste dump at Ward Valley and the open pit gold mine at Indian Pass. I forgot to introduce myself, the moderator here, so I'll jump in real quick. I'm a professor of environmental studies at San Jose State University, and my research and teaching is around just transition, renewable energy development, and land use conflict. Our second panelist will be Christian Torres, and he's the he's the director of climate equity and resilience at Comité Cívico del Valle. Christian has worked extensively in environmental justice efforts across Imperial Valley and the Salton Sea region. He serves on the leadership team for the Imperial County AB 617 communities, was a member of the People's Blueprint Writing Group, and provides technical assistance to community air grant recipients implementing air quality monitoring at the community level. He leads CCV's work in the Lithium Valley program, helping create an equitable framework for the development of mineral extraction and electrification. This work includes advocacy and managing the Lithium Valley Community Coalition, a coalition of environmental, social justice, and organized labor, workforce, and economic development through the High Roads Training Partnership Collaboration and the California Jobs First program in the southern border. Our third panelist, Jared Nymark, is the California mining organizer at Earthworks. He works to support frontline communities at risk from existing and proposed mining throughout California, Before joining Earthworks, Jared worked as a program associate at the 11th Hour Project, where he helped develop new grant-making initiatives to support indigenous self-determination, protect the right to protest, and address the impacts of mining in the context of renewable energy transition. Jared has a background in political ecology and is passionate about the movements for environmental and social justice. He's previously worked in solidarity with the Karen Indigenous Rights Movement in Myanmar and conducting research and advocacy for campaigns to defend territory from mining, megadams, oil palm, and other extractive projects. He holds a BS in Earth Systems from Stanford University and a Master's of Environmental Science from the Yale School of Environment. And then finally, our fourth panelist, Daniela Flores, co-founded Imperial Valley Equity and Justice Coalition in June 2020, together with an intergenerational group of residents. As executive organizer, she facilitates the organization's mission as a progressive community power building organization to advocate and organize for health equity, economic, social development that centers historically marginalized communities of Imperial Valley, including environmental protections and community benefits during lithium development. Daniela and the coalition strive for an Imperial Valley where families can live, work, dream, and thrive. Before For Equity, Daniela was a research consultant for 5 years at Harder & Company Community Research, a research and evaluation firm. Daniela has a master's in public health from the University of California, Berkeley, and dual BS degrees in public health and biology from UC San Diego. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Preston Arrowweed to give some opening remarks on the history of the region and bring an Indigenous cultural perspective to start us off today. So Preston, the floor is all yours. Welcome, everyone. Again, thank you.
Thank you. You know, I've had a lot of information sent to me from universities at the very beginning. I've read some of them, and I can see that the problems will come up from what they're doing. I can see that. There's so many things in there, yet they ignore it, and that really surprises me. I mean, it's sad. Now, they do have some people on their side that say it's okay. I think they're educated people, probably got PhDs or doctors and all of that. And for an educated person, why can't they see what they're doing is wrong? That I don't understand. On one hand, there's some who saying it's wrong. The other say, go ahead and do it. It's okay. They're not going to stop it. But in my case, I don't have a doctorate. I'm not educated in the white man's way that much. I do have some that have, helped me a lot. But I do know 2 cycles of songs that go all night that tell the history. It tells about the journey. It tells about the creation. And it tells about, it could talk about, the history, geography, and where we've been at theology. It says so many things that I know in these songs that tell me. And for instance, now, on one part, the Khmer, I'm part Khmer. I speak Khmer too. I can speak the dialect. I can speak Khmer and Quechan, but Khmer. My great-grandfather lived in Imperial Valley, near the New River, in those areas. That's where they lived. That's where he came from. My grandmother came from there. They came to here to the Quechan. My grandmother married a Quechan, so we stayed here. They stayed here. Now, there is a story, that I hear about that area. It's a very powerful place where the geothermal. Scientists say if you keep monkeying around with the geothermal, it will blow. And then it's close to the San Andreas Fault. You can cause a massive earthquake, and that's what they say. But that doesn't stop them. I mean, I know it's true. And lately, there have been some earthquakes and some swarms in this area in Imperial, El Centro. It's starting. It has happened. And I don't know if they can see that. They understand that it's dangerous. And then what really goes back, the reason I know it's very powerful is that there is a legend that isn't told at all. I've never revealed it. Some people have heard me talk about it. It's a story about when the people lived there, there was a giant snake that came from the ocean and went into the Salton Sea. And it was a big white snake and it had spots all over it. And those spots were the repository of knowledge that he was bringing. They got him. And then they eventually, they cremated him. And that heat from the fire, all the repository of knowledge burst from his body, and all the knowledge went to the mountains around this area, came from there. I think where it surfaced, when it came, it surfaced right where Obsidian Butte is, show you the power when he came over here. He surfaced there, and there was it must have been a big giant volcano or some burst in all those obsidian there, the Obsidian Butte. That's where he came from. And based on that, I know it's powerful, that we shouldn't mess with it, that something happened. And that's and I think that there are people who know. They know what I'm talking about, but that doesn't stop them. But they're far away sitting somewhere causing all this danger and problems because it wouldn't affect them, but it would affect this area. It will. It will cause them. And that snake, that giant snake, I'm talking, and the ancient word, which nobody knew except me, and I learned that from the Kumya, is that it's called a shweo, the giant snake that came out of there. A shweo came as a warning. It came to show us how powerful that place is. When he came, he surfaced over there. So I speak more in that area that way than I do the technical way that I see in the lithium. I have lithium liabilities here, untold threat to water in the Russian mine, American gold. Now, water is another thing that come into there. It's going to cause billions and billions of gallons of water, and they're not telling anyone about that. It takes water. And there in the Imperial Valley, as a matter of fact, the Colorado River is going down all the time with the global warming, and yet they want to use that. When I asked that question a long time ago, they said, we're going to bring the water in. We're going to deliver the water and mine for gold. I said, you don't have enough water to do that. 2,000 gallons a day, even that isn't much. You couldn't do it with that. You're going to need more. And you're going to go to the Colorado or the underground water, which is the aquifers. That aquifer was meant for the people. And if you use that up, what's going to happen? You know, you're going to have sinkholes and you're going to have no water, nothing to, if we have thirst, we can't have any water. And the Colorado River is going to go down. And what are you going to do with the people? And they don't think of that. And that really surprises me, that all these educated people with doctorate degrees in their hands, and they're going to help destroy this area. And then I've also asked our environmental person here on our reservation, I said, I want you to get me a list of all the creatures that are within that area. And give me those lists, and I want to see. And I'll bet you in that list, you're going to find certain creatures there that are connected. The creation story connected to our religion, theology is connected to that. Now, all this knowledge that I have, what I've known, we knew about this before the Bible was written. We knew about it. And that's what I'm quoting from what I learned from long ago. And I'm not quoting, I'm not using, well, I speak English, I have to say it in English, but I'm not using their knowledge. I'm using my knowledge, what has been passed down to where I learned. And that's what I'm doing. I've been doing this for years. And there's another battle you forgot to mention, was the Battle of Sleepy Hollow. I went there and took that land back too with men and guns. I've done that too. I faced great odds and I didn't back down. Ward Valley was one of them too. If Ward Valley if they had buried the nuclear waste over there, it would have gone into the Colorado River from the aquifer. Those things have happened. People don't seem to realize what they're doing. And I'm hoping that together we can make people see that there's danger here. There's people who are going to get hurt, going to die, they're going to lose so many things. If the massive earthquake came, I've seen it happen some time ago, some years ago, there was one, and there was a lot of buildings that were wrecked over there in El Centro. There was a lot of people that lost many things. It could happen again. It could be worse than that. Right now, I think the highest they hit was 4.8. Well, it could go higher, but it doesn't stop them. And I don't know what it would take to stop. I guess they'll take the day when it does come and they say, yeah, they're wrong. It's too late then. It's too late. I don't know how we can tell them because we're just a small organization. We're just a small organization and we're trying. But I won't give up either. I'll keep telling them what I know and whether they accept it or not. Because in a way, they're telling me my knowledge, everything that I know, my religion doesn't mean nothing. That's what they're telling me. That freedom of religion is gone. That's my freedom. My freedom of religion is what I believe. And my belief is coming true, what I see. And it shows the power of that area. It will grow. Something will happen. I hope that we can get together and find a way to stop it. We can argue our points, and I'm sure you'll come up with something. And I can only quote what I know from here because they already know about all the research is done. They know the research, it's been done. They know it, but they still go against it. They still contradict it. So hopefully you will help us. We'll all get together and do something, say something. And I thank you for this meeting, that you're concerned, because whatever we say, we're not here to stop progress. We're here to save the world, the people. That's what we're trying to do. We're not here to stop their goals so they can, make money. The electric cars, is not going to work because of the power of that thing they're pulling out and what it's going to do to the land. It's going to, the land will rebel. It will go against it. It'll fight back, and that's what's happening. The land is showing, don't do this, lay off. That's what it's doing. What's it saying? Don't bother me. You bother a wildcat long, it'll bite you. You don't do that. But they haven't got the sense, and they're putting people in front of it, not them. I'd like to get their leaders and stay right there and camp there until it blows up. They won't do that. They know it's going to happen. So they won't live there. They'll sit somewhere else and make these decisions that'll do damage. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Preston, for bringing that perspective. Next up is Christian Torres.
Thank you, Dustin, and thank you, Preston. So I'll start by setting a little bit of a landscape for those unfamiliar with the Imperial Valley. The Imperial Valley is located smack dab in the middle of very huge environmental concerns, one of them being the Salton Sea, which has had reduced outflows to it over the last couple of decades. It is exceedingly drying out, and a lot of what has been deposited there from the last 100 years is now being exposed. So this exposed playa is a concern to all the communities that are living close by, because we have strong winds, we have these exposed materials, and now they're being blown into these communities that don't have the best access to healthcare or direct access to emergency services sometimes. To the south of that, in the Imperial Valley, we have the international border. In the international border, at the onset of the 90s, there was a huge boom in manufacturing. Now, this manufacturing is less enforced as it is in the US, but it is right smack in the border. We have a huge port of entry that brings a lot of materials, causes a lot of traffic and emissions for a community in the south of the Imperial Valley. So it encompasses both of them together, and we have a lot of concerns from the residents here. And that's where the movement for environmental justice rises up. And the fact that a lot of these issues can be resolved if we take care of our environment and environmental health issues. The Imperial Valley, even though it has this important role to play by being on the border, by now being targeted as a place where an energy transition mineral has had a lot of underinvestment over its history. We have been ignored or underrepresented in programs that should be benefiting everybody in this area. We are next to San Diego. San Diego is a huge metropolitan area where a lot of the resources end up, and then they get to tell Imperial like how much you can get or how much you deserve. And we've lived that through a lot of emergencies, a lot of scenarios. And recently, that's what caused a lot of issues during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Through that, we saw a lot of rising movements in the Imperial Valley working towards environmental justice because we knew we deserved better. We know everybody deserves a right to live a healthy and clean life. And now we're at a crux where there is this generational opportunity that companies that are not all from the Imperial Valley, we have 3 major players, Controlled Thermal Resources, Energy Source Minerals, and Berkshire Hathaway Renewables coming into this area. And they have operated geothermal facilities, some of them in the past. They have generated energy. And yes, we know that renewables is a change that is going to happen as we lean away from fossil fuels in this fight against climate change. But now you're adding a new process, and a process that hasn't been proven to the scale that they're trying to do. Adding this process is going to require, as President said, a lot of water to be used. That is a big elephant in the room that I think we all, in the environmental justice movement here, and a lot of communities that are directly living and seeing this nearby, have asked. We need to know how that is going to be planned for the future. Each year, the Colorado River and the reservoirs are shrinking. We are seeing less and less water being allocated. We have been asked, as our public utility negotiates on behalf of the Imperial Valley, to reduce water usage. Now, if you want to scale this up and be the key to electrification of not just California, but the US, because that is the mandate that's being asked, then you have to start really asking and responding to these questions. Right now, we're in a period where Imperial County is working towards those plans. Imperial County is working on a programmatic environmental impact report, an environmental justice element to their general plan that is also being tied into some of these activities. But we're also seeing some of these companies that want to do direct lithium extraction try to get their own environmental impact reports before the programmatic process takes over at the end of the summer. And this is where those questions rise. If a programmatic environmental impact report is being prepared and everybody wants to start their projects before that, then we need those answers now. We can't wait until the end of this year to hear back on the programmatic if those projects are being greenlit right now. And as part of this opportunity that has been touted, we also need to look at what protections we need to put in place so that this community isn't just an extraction community. As Dustin mentioned, part of my role is to work on now economic development for the community, as well as work towards if there are going to be opportunities, how can we make those localized? We want our people to be able to thrive because they've had a lot of false promises. And this could be another one if we don't build those safeguards right now that we don't want our community to see come and go. We've had solar, which was supposed to be another great opportunity to change our valley, but solar came and went within a year. You can't have a thriving community if you provide jobs for 1 year. And the promise of this being to 30 to 50-year lifetimes is enough to make wholesale changes to the region, to provide a base so that you can get those amenities that everybody needs, such as school, hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, where a lot of those unincorporated areas near the Salton Sea known geothermal resource area, which is where extraction is going to happen, are established. And if you establish that, then you can create a more positive growth. Right now, we have our colleague here, Daniela, who's also part of the outreach that is happening around this programmatic environmental impact report stage. This is one of those first times in the planning process where you have community-based organizations that are trusted messengers that are reached out to by residents actually be able to connect with community on a lot of these issues. Our role right now is to play that connecting and interpretation message of what are these planning processes building up to that community can understand. Because what's happening now isn't just going to be affecting us for the next 3 to 5 years. This could be the next 50 years. And community should be worried about that. They should be alerted and they should be knowledgeable of it. Because these are going to be decisions that are going to be made at this level. This is the Imperial Valley, what we're talking about. This is the area that's going to be the most affected. So those community members need to know best. And they need to be heard, listened to, and their input needs to be really considered as part of the process. And with that, Dustin, I'll pass it on to Jared.
Next up, Jared.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian and Preston, for starting off the conversation. And thanks for everyone for being here. I'm joining you from Ohlone Lands in San Francisco. And in my role as an organizer with Earthworks, I work to support frontline communities impacted by mining throughout California, including in Imperial Valley. And today I'm going to present some of the findings from our report that was published together with Comité Civico on the impacts of direct lithium extraction from geothermal brine in the valley. And the goal of this report is to educate frontline communities about the potential impacts so they can be, as Christian was speaking to, informed participants in the planning process. And this report reviews academic literature, government documents, and other publicly available documents to synthesize information that we know about projects. And I'd like to give a huge thanks to everyone who made this report possible, including some folks who I think are attending the webinar today. Kenny Larson for his research, Steve Emmerman, James Blair, and John Hatter for their technical review, and all the staff at Comité and Earthworks who provided feedback. So we released this report last November 2023 at Comité's annual Environmental Justice Summit. And since then, it's been used in workshops with community members in the region. But we wanted to share it on this webinar since what's happening in Imperial Valley has implications across the state, nationwide, and globally as well. So I'll start with an introduction. We know that demand for lithium is expected to increase dramatically in the coming years. Research by University of Technology Sydney shows this could reach 280% of current reserves by 2050. And you'll see a lot of other pretty dramatic estimates out there. But this is not set in stone. We can reduce this by 25% by expanding battery recycling infrastructure. And this can be reduced even further by shifting to cars with smaller batteries and away from the model of private car ownership. Even so, lithium extraction is being promoted aggressively in the United States as a so-called critical mineral in order to promote national security and reduce the risk of supply chain disruptions, since most of the lithium comes from outside the US. And we know that electric vehicles and lithium-ion batteries are a really important part of the transition away from fossil fuels. We're in favor of that. But lithium also has well-documented negative social and environmental impacts, creating water stress in really dry environments, polluting air and water, sometimes requiring years and years of treatment, and violating indigenous rights. And in the US, much of this happens under the extremely flawed 1872 mining law. Notably, that doesn't apply to the lithium deposits in Imperial Valley, but it's within this context that we're seeing a global rush for lithium. And so we have a responsibility and an opportunity to address these issues and make sure that we don't repeat the harms of the fossil fuel era. And so that brings us to Lithium Valley. And what this image shows is Imperial Valley stretching roughly from the Salton Sea to the border with Mexico in Southern California. It's a largely agricultural region. And it has one of the largest lithium deposits in the world, which has led to this name, Lithium Valley. And as Christian was describing, this lithium deposit is located in a largely low-income Latinx community that's already exposed to significant environmental health hazards, especially poor air quality from the Salton Sea. So addressing this is going to be really important for environmental justice. And as we heard from Preston, there's also issues of indigenous rights at stake. The proposed lithium extraction is in the footprint of the ancient Lake Cahuilla, what's now the Salton Sea, and its ancestral homelands to multiple tribes who have expressed in multiple public meetings related to lithium development concerns about lack of consultation and impacts to cultural sites around the sea, such as Obsidian Butte. So improving this, respecting the right to free, prior, and informed consent, protecting these sites is going to be really critical as Lithium Valley develops. Before I get into the specific technologies being proposed at Lithium Valley, I'd like to quickly review the different types of lithium extraction. There's hard rock mining, which mostly takes place in Australia. This is what you typically think of when you think of mining. Large open pits, which have many devastating impacts, destruction of habitat and sacred landscapes, air and water pollution. You also have lithium that's found in brine, concentrated over long periods of time in saladas or salt flats, primarily in South America. And here lithium is extracted using large evaporation ponds. And the big issue is the massive amount of water lost to the evaporation process. And what we're seeing now, not just in Imperial Valley, but all over the world, is a new set of technologies called direct lithium extraction, or DLE. And DLE refers to chemical or physical processes that directly remove lithium from brine. And it's being promised as more environmentally friendly because it doesn't have this big footprint on the landscape. So it's important to note that these proposals look different in different locations. There's different technologies being used. The brine deposits are different. In Imperial Valley, I want to make sure it's clear the lithium is not located in the Salton Sea itself. The lithium is dissolved with other minerals in the geothermal reservoir deep below ground on the south shore of the Salton Sea. There's geothermal plants that are currently extracting this brine to generate renewable electricity by flashing it to steam, turning the turbines of the plant, and then re-injecting it back underground. So the proposal is to use DLE, direct lithium extraction, to select for lithium from that brine before it is re-injected. And these would be in conjunction with new or existing geothermal power plants. These proposals are proprietary, but they rely on a combination of adsorption or ion exchange technologies. Again, where that lithium ion is selected and all the other minerals dissolved in that brine, they're trying not to select for them. This has been demonstrated at small scales, but it hasn't yet been done at commercial scale. And so a lot of uncertainties remain. As Christian mentioned, there's no lithium currently being extracted at commercial scale, but you have two companies, Energy Source Minerals and Controlled Thermal Resources, that have received their permits. They've previously shown this at smaller scale. They haven't started putting these out yet. There's also a third player, Berkshire Hathaway, which operates 10 of the geothermal plants. They don't yet have a proposal for commercial scale extraction, but they're potentially the biggest player when it comes to lithium region. And there's also this master planning process for the Lithium Valley Specific Plan and Program EIR to streamline the permitting for future lithium development. So that's setting the stage for why this lithium boom, the context of Lithium Valley, and the current status of projects. Now I'm going to get into some of the findings in our report related to the potential environmental impacts. The first is air quality. As we heard, the valley already has severely degraded air quality from a number of sources, but especially from the exposed playa or lake bed from the Salton Sea. And in particular, the region's been out of compliance with standards for ozone and particulate matter, leading to high rates of asthma and other health impacts. So lithium extraction will have some direct impact to air quality. That comes from greenhouse gas emissions from the construction and operation of these plants, from hydrogen chloride emissions. Hydrochloric acid is used as part of the mineral extraction process, and if not managed properly, can be released as vapor that's harmful to human health. And also all the vehicle trips in and out of these plants for construction and operation. That can be mitigated through use of electric vehicles or paving of roads for dust suppression. What's really important here is to look beyond the individual projects and do a cumulative analysis of all these projects coming in and how they'll impact the overall air quality in the region. The next issue we look at in the report is freshwater consumption. This is probably the most important issue, as you've heard already. Lithium extraction will consume additional fresh water from the Colorado River for cooling and processing. And this is supplied by the Imperial Irrigation District through canals. And we know from the proposals that are out there already that Energy Source Minerals plans to use 3,400 acre-feet per year. Controlled Thermal Resources plans to use 6,700 acre-feet per year. We don't know yet for Berkshire Hathaway since they don't have a proposal, but we have some idea based on what they've publicly testified in various meetings. So this is actually fairly low compared to the big water user in the region, agriculture. But the challenge is that if the lithium expands to its planned capacity, it's going to come across or come up against what the irrigation district has set aside for industrial use, which is 25,000 acre-feet per year. And we're already basically at that limit with all the projects in the pipeline. So there's a question of where that additional water is going to come from. And addressing this is urgent given the ongoing crisis on the Colorado River. California's negotiated cuts agreed to last year of 1.6 million acre-feet, the majority of which will come from Imperial Valley. So there's going to be some decisions, trade-offs, careful analysis that needs to be made. I also want to point out that you'll often hear the companies make comparisons. Oh, we use so much less water compared to South American operations. And those are difficult to verify because the data from South America isn't very transparent. But some recent articles found that direct lithium extraction projects may actually use more freshwater input than these evaporation projects. And if you look at the proposals here, they do actually use more than the Salar de Olaroz project in Argentina, which uses about 50 cubic meters of water per metric ton of lithium produced. And these projects are estimated to be in the hundreds. Now, this is just looking strictly at freshwater inputs to the system. We're not looking at the water lost through the evaporative process, which is potentially much higher in the South American operations. But it draws our attention to the fact that we need to be careful that we're not comparing apples to oranges. And regardless, Imperial Valley's water use needs to be analyzed within the local context, and there's going to be tough decisions about how much water to allocate to lithium extraction compared with other uses. And the reason this is so important is the Salton Sea. The Salton Sea is rapidly shrinking, primarily due to the 2003 agreement, which transferred water from Imperial Valley to San Diego and other urban areas, and it's fed by this runoff through agricultural fields. So if Colorado River water is diverted from agriculture to the lithium industry, it would speed up this shrinking, exposing more toxic lake bed and compounding the ongoing air quality crisis. And so this is something we would really like to see properly analyzed and mitigated. And so far, we haven't seen that in the lithium projects that have been developed to date. Using this water supply for lithium might also limit future opportunities for Salton Sea restoration. This can be addressed through there's a lithium excise tax. Once lithium is being extracted, 20% of that tax goes into a Salton Sea restoration fund. But at the end of the day, you're going to need water to do more restoration projects on the sea. So I'd like to quickly go through the last two areas we look at in the report. One is hazardous waste. And going back to this diagram, most of the other waste, the brine that's left over, will be re-injected back into the geothermal reservoir. So that's a really good way to minimize the amount of waste produced. However, there is some solid waste that precipitates out onto the filters. And that needs to be disposed of, stored, transported really carefully because it has the potential to contain arsenic, lead, and other elements that are hazardous to human health. And you have, every few years, these plants have to go through a big descaling process where they basically unclog the wells. And that has the potential to lead to brine spills and produce even more hazardous waste that may be shipped out of state. And so that needs to be carefully looked at as an environmental justice issue. Another way that waste can be minimized is by selling some of the byproducts. But there's a real question of, is there a market to buy some of those silica, zinc, manganese, and other minerals that are coming out of the brine? Finally, seismic activity. This is something we've heard a lot of questions about. Preston talked about it at the beginning. Lithium extraction itself won't have an impact on seismic activity, but future geothermal drilling might, especially if they end up using enhanced geothermal systems similar to fracking to create more fissures in the rock. So this is something that needs a lot of further study and monitoring. But probably the biggest takeaway on seismic activity is that Imperial Valley is already living with a baseline risk of earthquakes. So all of these facilities need to be designed with the highest standards for earthquake safety in mind, so as to prevent accidents, brine spills, things like that. So to conclude, the environmental impacts of direct lithium extraction may prove to be less harmful than hard rock or evaporation mining, but there's still potential adverse impacts that need to be fully analyzed and mitigated. And so we hope our report helps promote environmental justice by making sure communities and now the wider public are aware of these impacts and can fully participate in the environmental review process. And one way you can do this is by submitting scoping comments. So Imperial County is currently drafting a program, EIR, and this is to analyze the impacts of this 50,000 acre industrial lithium zone on the south shore of the Salton Sea. This includes not just lithium extraction, but also battery manufacturing, logistics, geothermal plants, and other land uses, and would streamline future development. So it's really important to get comments in by February 20th to share with the county any areas that you want to see analyzed in that environmental impact report. And so here we have a link that you can go to submit a comment. We have a sample letter focused on looking at the issue of water use and the Salton Sea. And with that, thank you. You can download the report on the Earthworks website, and we also have 2-page summary sheets available in English and Spanish, and the full report will be uploaded in Spanish soon. And I look forward to the Q&A and discussion. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Daniela.
Thank you so much, Earthworks and everyone for hosting this space. I'm really grateful to be here and be able to uplift some of a little bit about why environmental justice being at the center of any lithium development in Imperial Valley is so important. And I in my comments, I really do share from all, of course, lived experience as a resident. I'm based out of Calexico. And so I have spent the last few years just learning a lot about the perspectives of the people that live closest to the Salton Sea. And so that's, you'll be hearing some of my comments based on all of the things I've heard from residents. And I'll talk a little bit about the role that our group has had in the community in sharing information and in engaging folks and trying to be a bridge in communication between the government and the residents. I'll talk a little bit about folks already highlighted about some of the case studies that we've seen with like solar industries and with ag industry. I'll talk about maybe one more case there, and then spend the rest of the time just talking more, sharing some quotes directly from what we've heard from residents, and then more about our vision for how this development, and any development regarding lithium should happen here in Imperial. With that, I will just kind of start off by sharing about our group. Our group was born in 2020 amid the pandemic. We saw a lot of the injustice that was happening in the pandemic, and we just see those same themes show up across all the different issues that we touch on. And so we've took a deep dive into the environmental justice issues in partnership with Comité Cívico del Valle, who had really been at that point in 2020, like taking the lead in a lot of the conversations that were happening back then regarding lithium. That's the first time I ever heard about lithium in the Valley in 2020. And that was the first time that I joined a meeting as an advocate with Comité, and people at that point, there were only a few hundred people that knew about that this was coming, right? It was a huge alarm that went off in 2020, because that's when really we started to hear some more of the concrete plans for the development. We started to hear dates being thrown out, like, development in 2024. And so that's sort of what we were hearing, and what we looked around and we noticed, okay, in 2020, very, very few people were privy to this information. And the industry and the county of Imperial at that point really didn't come out with any public statements about plans or even community forums to bring the community into what was happening. I know, and we recognize that all of that was very new at the time. But unfortunately, the whole, there's been, from our perspective, there's still it's still a small percentage of people in our community that can engage in a conversation about what's happening. Like, we commonly ask, oh, have you heard about the lithium happening in the Valley and the lithium extraction as to get a pulse in the community? And we still, the response we get is like, oh, we've kind of heard about it, but I don't really know what it is, right? And so I'll talk a little bit since folks haven't really talked about it in a deeper level. I'll talk a little bit about the SB 125 because that's one of so since 2020 there's three key legislations that have passed in the state of California. One, I won't remember the name off the top of my head, but it established a Blue Ribbon Commission that essentially explored the risks and the opportunities related to Lithium Valley. And then after that, there was the second legislation was SB 125, which Jared highlighted a moment ago. As he mentioned, 20% of those any revenue produced from that lithium tax would go to the restoration of the Salton Sea. But the 80% that goes back directly into the county is one that our community members are really keeping an eye on, because there's all these estimates of how much lithium is going to be extracted. There's all these billions of dollars that get thrown out in terms of the kind of industry profits that they're anticipating. And the tons of lithium that they're expecting to extract, right? And so with this tiered tax that was passed with SB 125 in 2022, the 80% that goes back to Imperial County, it goes back to the Board of Supervisors, the Imperial County Board of Supervisors, and they'll get to manage that fund. And so one of the biggest questions residents have is like, how is that money going to be spent? And how is that money going to be spent to help our community, right? And who gets to decide how the money gets spent? And so there's been another legislation that passed, SB 797, and that established the Lithium Valley Oversight Committee. And that hasn't been established and it hasn't met or anything. It's in its early stages. It just became the law in October. But this is one of as residents, there was a huge push from Imperial County to, whether we agree or disagree on this lithium development, we knew that taxing it from the state and having some oversight at the state was really important. I know there's so much that I could speak about this, but I'm gonna just fast forward into some other important things to elevate at this time. The law, the SB 125, not only did it establish a tax, but it also provided an opportunity, as Christian mentioned, for community-based organizations like ours to step into the role of providing widespread information to residents in a way that was accessible and that it was that allowed for people to give us their input and then share that information with those that are trying to shape this development. So we've met with a lot of residents, and our whole aim has been to provide a comprehensive overview for communities to really be able to be empowered to talk to their neighbors, to talk to other residents, to talk to their friends and their family members about what's happening, because we believe that every single resident needs to participate because it will impact all of us. Some of the challenges that we have, I know Christian highlighted a few, but I wanted to take a moment to add another layer, just some more specifics. In our county, we have the highest child hospitalization rates due to asthma in the state. We have some of the most polluted air, and we'll talk more about sources. I know I saw a question in the chat. I'll leave that for the Q&A. But of course, a lot of it comes from the industry, the agribusiness here, trucking vegetables out of this county, and a lot of it being the hay, which is one of the biggest producers, and water users, right? That gets even exported into Saudi Arabia and to other places all over the world. Our county, we have one doctor for every 4,000 residents. The north end, the communities of Nyland and Calipatria that are nearby, Nyland's elementary school is only 3 miles away from the controlled thermal resource plant. And in the environmental review, folks said that it wasn't a significant distance, that it was 3 miles was not of concern, but we believe that it is significant, and the impacts that Jared has mentioned are to be taken very seriously. I'll say, you know, time and time again, because our community has one of the highest unemployment rates in the nation, they often pin jobs against our livelihood. They say, oh, this will bring jobs, you know, so that's why you need to accept this in your community. But we're tired of that. Yes, we need jobs, but there are a lot of residents in our community that don't believe that we need to just accept jobs at the expense of our health and the environment that we breathe, the air that we breathe. We were promised jobs when the prisons came in, and now we have 2 state prisons and 1 detention center that houses thousands of people. We have a highly militarized economy here in Imperial Valley, and we want to see things differently. We want to see an economy that is not based on violence, and that is, you know, focused on healing our environment and protecting our human bodies. We see humans and residents living in the area more than just workers. We see them as humans that deserve clean air to live healthy lives here. We believe, like Mr. Preston shared, we believe that we shouldn't just open the floodgates open to all the extraction, right? If we are to be one of the main sources of that lithium, we want to make sure that it's not just limitless and that they just take, and we want to try to preserve most of the natural state of our planet that we can, right? And you know, I know I'm out of time. I always have way more that I want to say than I have time for, but I will just end by sharing maybe a few quotes from some of the residents. I'm going to share three quick ones. Quote from one of the residents living in Westmoreland. Water demand would exceed available non-agricultural supply as currently planned by the IID Imperial Irrigation District. How are they planning to do this? How does this add up when you plan to build all these warehouses, but you have the lithium companies saying they're planning to use more water than what's available? Another resident asking, who will be doing the cleaning up after the area is done? What is their exit plan? They're talking about this industry as being able to be here for maybe 30 years. I don't know, the estimates do change, but what's the exit plan? Are we just gonna be left with all the damage done to our earth and our aquifers and everything that has been noted? And we know that we have not heard any responses of what kind of exit plan has been discussed. Resident asking, how will the lithium development affect the Sunny Bono Refuge? As you know, lots of birds rely on the Salton Sea area during their migration. And then lastly, a resident asking, how do we get more respiratory clinics for the kids that have breathing problems? There are no hospitals in the North End. There is a trailer clinic there. And yet we see that even the tax revenue priorities does not include healthcare. The Board of Supervisors have a draft priority plan for the revenue. It does not include education. It does not include healthcare, but it includes 50% for county administration. So it's very important for residents to know what's going to happen with that money, and that if it does end up going through, that it includes people. So we don't just want to be an extraction site. We want to move beyond the conversation of just replacing one car gas tank with one electric vehicle battery. We want to see the conversation go beyond that. How are we creating public transportation systems that are clean, using clean energy, and not just appeasing to the auto industry so that they play ball here, right? So we want community benefits agreements. We want it in writing. We want some restrictions, and we want those in writing as well. And we want to clean up the Salton Sea. So I know with that, I did go over time. I'm going to give back the mic to Dustin, and just happy to talk with folks at a separate time and go deeper on this issue. But just thank you for your time.
Very powerful, Daniela. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I think it's very important for people to hear from the ground what the community's feedback has been so far. So with that, we're going to have a little bit of Q&A. So I want to encourage everybody, if you have any questions, to put them into the Q&A, and or if we see them in the chat, we'll grab them there. But we have a couple already lined up, and my first question as moderator, I'm just going to take the mic and just ask a couple questions to folks, and maybe I'll ask 3 questions to get started. Actually, I'll do one at a time. Let me start with Preston, if that's okay. Preston, I have a question for you. I had the opportunity to get a tour from Dr. James Blair of some of the cultural sites around the Salton Sea, including Obsidian Butte. Can you tell us more about the importance of protecting cultural sites at the Salton Sea, such as Obsidian Butte? Maybe tell us a little bit about that particular feature and why it's important.
Well, I think it's important to talk about Obsidian Butte because that's where the power went. That's where the power came out, and it is powerful. You can't mess with that because it got that. It could blow. It could blow up the way they're doing it. Because when they do this thing, I've never heard of an adverse impact given. Oh, it's great, but what is the other side? We've never heard it. And our side is saying, you mess with that Obsidian Butte and you mess with the power, it'll blow. That's what we're saying. It doesn't take no scientists to know that. We know that, but yet they still mess around with it. And although it seems like it's just a tribal belief, it's just a cultural belief, it's just a Native American belief, but there's some truth in it. And I think they know that truth because they have never written an adverse impact as to what happens when you mess with it. They never have. I've asked for that at these meetings. Give me the adverse impact. They don't have any. They only tell you the good side of it because they know what could happen. They know if they fool around with it, the chance that they're taking. They know that. Until that day, if they were to come to me and say, "Hey, we're gonna do this. What do you think?" I say, "Well, you can go ahead as long as there's no big adverse impact. If it's really safe, but if it's not, then get out of there." That's what I would say. And as for our being in history, that we know what we're talking about, there's a history about long ago. There was a man named Gifford who wrote the Commias of Imperial Valley. That was a long time ago. Gifford was from Berkeley, I think, and he did the research about the Commias of Imperial Valley. Now, Gifford doing research, a man named Narpai, the Comia. Well, Narpai was married to a woman named Rosa. Rosa was my grandmother's first cousin, and they were in Imperial Valley. That's a long time ago. And all these stories that I heard from the Comia comes directly from them. And now what I heard is the stories that I know. It comes from a man who is a singer, a healer, and an orator. I was his student, and I've always listened to him. And he was, he talked about things like this, and he sang songs. I mean, he told me through the songs. So it is powerful. You shouldn't mess with it. That's all I can say. And I think we need to ask for an adverse impact. I don't think they're going to give us any. Ask for that. I've asked for that. What you're doing, what is the other side of it? They never tell you. And as for the jobs, I just heard the last time they did that, Alcatia, when they put those wind machines there, it's employment. Shit, nobody works there. And they talked about the solar. They have no jobs for solar people, and they even teach that program at Arizona, at Imperial Valley College. So they learn all about it with no jobs. They pull this job thing all the time, and it doesn't work. And the same thing's going to happen. So I think the power. Oh God, they should ask for an adverse impact. All I can say. What is the other side of this? You talk about how great we can all charge our cars and cruise around, but how long it's going to take? Because that's the only thing we're going to have to charge, and before you know it, when we got rid of all the gas and then all would depend on electricity, the price is gonna jump up, and nobody can afford to cruise around in an electric car. You know, it'll go up. It's gonna change, but we never think of that adverse impact. I'd like to get somebody who can sit down and there is adverse impacts. These are some of the things I have here that was sent to me. Lithium liabilities, an untold threat to water in the rush to mine American lithium. See, that's all there too. There's other things that I have, but I don't depend on that because after reading that, they should know. But yet it doesn't faze them at all. I have other research sent to me, but I go back to my own tribal ways and I talk, you know. So I place myself from Imperial Valley because of my ancestry. My grandmother came from there. My great grandfather came from there, and I'm talking about how you're going to destroy it. I believe that everybody has a right to. If you live there, you have a right to live. Years ago, when I talked about the Colorado River, I said the Colorado River was years ago. At the very beginning, a water snake, a giant water snake, was there to protect the water. Since then, you've built so many dams that probably the poor snake, I don't know what happened. He can't protect the river. Look what's happened. They've cut him off. He can't protect the river. And look what they're doing. That's a sign there. They can't protect the river because they blocked him off. And the water used to go straight into Mexico, into the ocean. And they blocked that off. And you know, when I spoke on that subject, there were many Native Mexican people there. When I talked about what they did to Colorado and to the people, the river that went in that direction that protects us, all the Mexican people cheered for me because nobody had the nerve to tell the government what I was saying. And this was the Department of Interior I was talking to. And I told them what they were doing wrong. I said that in the future, that's going to endanger all living things in this area, and it's coming. And when I told them, and after I got through, all the Mexican people gathered around me and said, I spoke to them. I said, if you are a part of the living things that are out there, if you're a part of that, then I spoke for you. It's for everything that lives there I'm talking about. So, and the water is very important, and they've done that. And now they want to use that to destroy us after they dab it up and use it. So that's all I can say about it.
Thank you for sharing that, Preston. Christian, I have a question for you. Daniela mentioned the lithium excise tax, and CCV helped pass that lithium excise tax. Can you tell us more about the tax and its importance to environmental justice issues in the region?
Sure. So as Daniela spoke about, the tax has two mechanisms. One is to provide 20% of the revenue to a Salton Sea account, because the Salton Sea programs do not have long-term funding for operations and maintenance. So every mitigation and restoration effort that's happening right now needs to be renewed. And this is one way to do that. The other is 80% of the tax is going back to Imperial County, of which it is up to the county to decide how to create a community benefits program that can address issues locally. One of the original conceptions of that tax was to make sure that at least 30% of that revenue that goes to Imperial County be invested directly into those affected communities. But the language in the tax ultimately says that those directly affected aren't just Nyland, Bombay, Calipatria, Westmoreland. It includes most of the unincorporated and cities in the Imperial County. And we're talking about places that are, you know, over 20 miles away sometimes from that extraction site. So those aren't the directly affected. But the reason for that is because the investment has to happen in these communities where they are going to feel the first impacts and also have had historical low investment to solve a lot of these issues. As Anil said, there isn't a robust or minimal public health system taking care of these communities. So that is one of the solutions that needs to be in place. When we went out and hosted a workshop for a lot of these residents, the first thing they asked wasn't about the land use plan. It wasn't about the jobs. It was about, what is this going to do to our health? Because For them, they know that water is a big issue. They know the Salton Sea is directly impacting them. So one, yes, a Salton Sea Fund can be great if it can help them, but it is not going to generate enough to solve every issue with the Salton Sea. And two, they know that they don't get historically heard. And that's why I think the second component that Nael spoke about, which is that oversight committee, is really important to folks locally as well. That it's been tied into that lithium extraction tax. Because what we heard from some residents is that they are tired of having people that live nowhere near those communities make decisions for them. They're like, people live in other areas other than El Centro, and El Centro being the capital of this county. Right? And you're talking about people that are living within proximity to the Salton Sea. Some of them could walk out and they can see the Salton Sea from their house. And they don't want somebody that's living over 20 miles away making decisions for them. It is not fair to them. They don't know the situation and they don't know the issues they're dealing with. And with the tax, one of the biggest things is that it is under danger right now. There is going to be a ballot measure to try to repeal taxes from the last 2 years. So what does that mean? It means that we could lose what is the basic community benefits program that this tax is creating before it's even implemented. A report from the Department of Finance, I believe, just analyzed whether this tax is fair or not, and there was no conclusion. It was, yes, this fee is one way, and then we could also do another type of fee. But either way, we don't know because the numbers keep changing. As Jared said, we don't know the final outcomes for extraction. So we don't know what this final revenue number could be. But what we do know is that community wants to get solutions done, and that given that a lot of this land is public, it is under our public utility agency that has leased it, that controls water, that community needs to benefit. It can't just be a public land used for private benefits.
Thank you for that, Christian. Daniela, how does your organizing on lithium issues intersect with For Equity's goals for social and environmental justice more broadly? And then maybe also if you could speak to the question about the main source of air pollution in the region, and I'm sure everybody could chime in with a little bit of their expertise on that too, but there you go.
Could you say it one more time? Is it, you mentioned, was it For Equity? Could you share the question one more time?
Yeah, I'm sorry. How does your organizing on lithium issues intersect with For Equity's goals for social and environmental justice more broadly?
I think one of the main things that we see in Imperial Valley, a place that has commonly been oppressed and disinvested, is that there's a lot of apathy. There's a lot of trauma that our residents have lived through, and you see that the majority of people aren't participating in these conversations. We know that the County Board of Supervisors and most of the government entities here in Imperial Valley are, speaking English when 96% of the, at least in Calexico, 96% of the community speak Spanish. And so there is one of the central things that we believe in is that communities participating in shaping policies and that impact their environment and the ways that they live and the industries that are available in their community, I think is central to equity. Participation from the community, transparency in those decisions. And so I think that just like every single issue that we work on regarding equity, it's about for people to build power among community members to ask for the kind of economy that we want, the kind of valley that we want to see, and asking for the meetings to be in the right language so that they are able to participate and that they're not held at 10 a.m. when we're all at work, but that they are accessible and available. So those are some central things, like transparency in decisions, proper engagement, and people feel recognizing that they're so important in participating, and overcoming some of that apathy, right? Because I talk to elders and they're like, well, nothing changes. And they've lived, that's their lived experiences, that nothing has changed. And so that's why we engage on the lithium industry. Like, we go to all the meetings. We try to go when they're for sure when they're during business hours. We try to go and then like try to share that information, package it, and share it in our own community meetings that we're going to. We're often giving the county feedback. You know, unfortunately, the County of Imperial does the bare minimum in terms of the engagement during the programmatic environmental impact review. Right now, our work on lithium has been you know, on that programmatic impact review, because it not only impacts just the lithium extraction plants, but it's actually, like Jared said, the 50,000 acres in that area. Many of those acres, which are just a couple miles away from where residents are going to school and living. And so, yeah, like working on this issue has been bringing a set of issues that we experience together, because there are similar mechanisms that both government and industry, unfortunately, you know, perpetuate these same injustices. And we're trying to, you know, fight, I mean, like, push back against that and resist, and try to ensure that, unfortunately, what we're seeing is that, yet again, a lot of the community stakeholders, like elected office officials, like, have, I think, you know, stopped to ask a lot of the hard environmental questions. Unfortunately, I've seen that the loud voices from those leaders have dimmed a little bit, right? Whether it's because some of those folks have received direct checks from BHE Renewables, or because they've been promised something for their city. They've been promised a certain percentage from that tax. I don't know what's happening behind closed doors. I'm not invited to those meetings. But I do know that there are reasons why those, like the opposition that we used to hear in 2020 and 2021, and some of it 2022, like that is all very dim, and there are only cheerleaders at the elected official level as it relates to the lithium development. So I saw the shift in how it was all centering environmental concerns at one point, and then that really isn't the case. But when we're in community talking to the residents, environment is still top priority. So I would just say that what the elected officials and those people in power are saying doesn't necessarily reflect a lot of what the residents still feel in their hearts and in their lungs and in all the challenges that they experience. With that, I mean, I'll share with the space with other colleagues here in case they want to share anything else.
Christian, could I get you to speak to the question on air pollution, or pick up off anything that Daniela was talking about? I know you have a lot of experience implementing some of those programs, so you could speak. The general question was like, what are the general air quality challenges? And it was discussed briefly in our presentation, but you can highlight those.
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Daniela, for kind of teeing up what a lot of the conversations have been, because Daniela's group, again, is one of 4 groups that is doing this outreach directly with the community, and it all ties back into that, the environment, their health. As we've heard, Imperial County is the highest for emergency visits for asthma rates, and that's the reason we started our air monitoring system back in the 2010s. So in 2013, the project launched. By 2016, we had air quality monitors deployed in 20 different locations throughout Imperial County, because there was a lack of accessible data to community. You know, we have agencies that do air quality monitoring, but they only monitor for ambient air quality. So they're looking at, you know, a lot of miles between them. It updates maybe once a day, but some things can change. And a lot of the causes for some of the air quality issues here are going to be the border, like I mentioned before. There's a lot of traffic. You have thousands of individuals crossing every day for work, for health reasons, to go to the doctor, family reasons, because we are a binational community. The fence doesn't separate families, so that it is something that we all kind of grow up accustomed to here, to crossing the border. But you know, you have vehicles idling for hours on end. You have trucks carrying merchandise that's manufactured in Mexico on end. And you know, a border fence doesn't stop pollution either from manufacturing. We see that happen. We see that happening with waterways as well. The new river carries a lot of pollution from manufacturing in Mexico and waste being dumped into it into the US. And that is all accumulating into the air quality basin that we have here, right? The air basin is an accumulation of all those things. The Salton Sea as well has been an issue. And, it's been studied for years on years. The warning signs came in 1996, and we still haven't addressed a lot of those issues. And then, we're still one of the counties that allows agricultural burning to happen. We see that the community air protection program that California implemented in 2017 and 2018, a lot of communities took that as an opportunity to create what's called a community emissions reduction plan. And in those, they included, we want to phase out agricultural burning. And, I've been part of that program here in the Imperial Valley. We have now 2 communities that are working on this. But when we pushed that in 2018, we were met with a lot of friction, not just by the agency, but also by farmers that showed up to those meetings and said that it's unfair to ask them to change that. But it wasn't unfair in the Central Valley, where you have a lot of the same conditions that we have here, and now they're working towards a zero ag burning space. So when folks ask about the air quality issues, there's a ton of things that contribute, but we are unfortunately in a scenario where, because of the air basin being surrounded by all these different scenarios, we have to deal with each thing separately. We can't just cumulatively create one strategy and hope that it solves everything else.
Great, thanks for that. There's a question about impacts to the Sonny Bono Preserve, and maybe we can not just focus on that particular preserve, but talk about if someone's able to speak to the questions around habitat and the lake shore, both from direct development of the lands for some of these facilities, but also from the potential shrinkage of the Salton Sea. Jared, are you able to speak to some of these habitat questions or potential impacts to the Sonny Bono Preserve, which is just a little bit north of where many of these facilities are, but not under development pressure directly, from my understanding?
Yeah, so I don't think Sonny Bono Preserve will be impacted directly, but of course, the creation of a large industrial zone for lithium extraction and other industries right next door would have impacts on the migratory bird populations that do come through. And the preserve is a really important place for the community to enjoy those benefits of being out in nature and getting to know those birds, and also just for conservation and biodiversity goals in general. So that's something that will need to be analyzed. Absolutely. I think there's also a concern about the general issue of wetland conservation. One thing that was revealed in the permitting process for controlled thermal resources was that they actually started dewatering the wetlands in the area without permits when they started their construction of their pilot facility. And so there's a big question of whether these companies are going to have to mitigate the impacts that they have to the existing wetland habitats out there on the shore of the Salton Sea.
So there's a question in here about whether, and maybe people have different levels of perspective on this, but whether this is an effort to oppose all lithium development or just advocate for better safeguards. So is this, what do we want to see here? What is the vision for Lithium Valley? So maybe I'll just open up to anybody who wants to speak generally to this question of, is this just an oppositional strategy, or is there a way to develop this resource equitably that helps meet some of the goals and objectives that we've laid out here today?
I'll start, and others please chime in. It feels in Imperial Valley that that ship has sailed, in terms of it, like us being able to stop it, with 2 of the companies already having environmental permitting. I think what now I'm advocating for are restrictions, that this doesn't become that we become the salad bowl of the United States or whatever, that we do put some safeguards and limitations in terms of restrictions. Like, again, I think the Kotan, like the folks that I've talked to really have reminded us of how it's really important to try to preserve the aquifers, because we don't know what's going to happen if those get disrupted at long term, right? We can't foresee thousands of years from now. And so I think from our perspective, the organization is starting to talk more directly about like restrictions and negotiations about, you know, in the first set of years, like, and then trying to map out those restrictions with actual plans. Like, the plan shouldn't be, like I said, to replace each gas car with one electric vehicle, like, which is what I'm starting to like. I constantly feel like that's the goal. The goal should be beyond that, into transforming our cities into a way that we rely less on cars and that we think of the bigger plan. So I feel like I'm unwilling to just let the gates open fully in the way that ag does and in the way that solar did. Solar in Imperial Valley, we have the #4 largest solar farm in the world, and we don't see any benefits. Our community doesn't get any discounts for the energy. Have super high bills because we're a desert here. And so I think we do need to put some very urgent safeguards, and I don't hear anyone else talking about that right now.
Yeah, and I'll add to, so Daniela's right, like, this isn't a scenario where you want to just switch over all transportation from one mode to the other. You need to have better designed cities, counties, and areas to reduce the reliance on individual vehicles. You want to have a good public transportation system. Right now, we're working on doing community interviews, and that's what we're hearing, that a lot of the barriers for people is that they're one-car households. And in an area as rural as Imperial Valley is, we don't have a robust public transit system, but if they did, they would want to use that. They would want to be able to send their kids off to college and using the public transit system to the community college, the extended campuses we have here. And we don't want to just put a stop to everything because, you know, we know that the mandate is there. The US in general is looking towards electrification. The state of California has already put this deadline by 2035 to go fully electric or zero emissions on a lot of transportation. So we know that they're pushing this forward. The fact that the governor visited out here, the fact that we're having the climate advisor for the Biden administration out here tells us that they're pushing this hard, and that if we are not in there to set up the safeguards, create a better plans, and ask that full mitigation be the bare minimum, that no one's going to be doing that, that they're going to push again forward. And what happened over 100 years ago with agriculture coming in here, using a lot of our ancestors in the Bracero movement to build this agro-industrial economy, is going to happen again. So we ask ourselves, if we were here over 100 years ago, would the system look the same way? Would our community look the way it does now, and would be in danger as we are now if we were there to speak up? So I think right now we have to speak up and work towards that. We're not saying to kill this whole industry, because we know that that ship has sailed, but we want to make sure that it's safe, it's sustainable, and that we don't become a sacrifice zone, right? And we put that on print.
And I'll just share that from where I sit at Earthworks, we have a lot of experience seeing the impacts of hard rock mining. We don't want more of that. I would love for the promises of this to be more responsible, safer, less environmentally harmful to be true. And if that's the case, we need to see full environmental analysis and mitigation and really rigorous safeguards in place to lead the way, and we'll follow the lead of our local partners in Imperial Valley.
Preston, did you have any final thoughts for us to share? You might not be able to hear us. Anyhow, I think we are about a minute from time, so I want to give a virtual round of applause to our panelists today for bringing us unique perspectives on a very important and critically challenging topic of decarbonizing our fossil fuel economy, and doing it in a way that's responsible and reflects an evolving consciousness of a planet that we want to live on sustainably and share with other species and all of that. So thank you all for joining us today. And please stay in touch with us. Find some of the organizations that are working on these issues. Reach out, say hello, schedule a meeting. Don't be shy. Don't be a stranger to this topic. It's not going to go away, and it's really important. So thank you again for your attention.